The Kansas State Wildcats had a sneaky good transfer portal that should improve this team drastically in 2025.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. I hope everyone had a great holiday. I know we did speak right after Christmas because we were so excited about the Rauh Bowl. We went live, it was our first live, and we hit our first milestone. So thank you very much. 200 subscribers. We wanted to get that by the end of the year, and we got it with just a few days to spare. So thank you so much for joining along for the ride. If you haven't already, please click that subscribe button and join the adventure. We're going to be here every single day of the week throughout 2025, talking about Kansas State sports all year long. It's going to be a really fun ride. I'm excited for it. But we had just had an exciting game at the Rauh Bowl this past weekend. The season is finally over for the Kansas State Wildcats football team, at least on the field for 2024. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the transfer portal, when it comes to offseason moves, possibly some coaching changes. We'll see what happens across that board. And of course, preparing for spring ball that happens in April. Let's talk about the transfer portal because officially it has finished. December 28th was the last day of the official transfer portal. Now, there are some people that will pop in and out of the portal. I'll get to that in just a minute, how that still happens. But for the most part, for Kansas State, the roster going forward to 2025 is what you currently have on this roster. Now, there may be a couple more added, probably not a couple more being subtracted in the eyes of at least the portal. We still have to get to 105 on the roster size, but when it comes to at least the transfer portal aspect, no one else should be leaving, at least at this point. I think the biggest win, before we dive into who came into the transfer portal, who came to Manhattan for Kansas State, before we dig into those on the offense and the defensive side, which we're going to do, then we're going to finish this show on what is still need to be done. But I think the first thing we have to do is talk about the biggest win of the transfer portal. And it's not who we got, it's who we kept. It's who stayed in Kansas State. The Avery Johnson effect is in full swing. There's no doubt about that. And we saw it in the Rauh Bowl. Even with his struggles in the first half, him stepping up, showing that he's making that progression to become that leader that we all know that he can be. And we get to see that even more in 2025. People are already surrounding him. People are already rallying around him. And it's contagious. We're starting to see that more and more every single day. And now we're getting a glimpse of it, what can happen with this team based on who stayed in the transfer portal. And two main names that I have to bring up, and I think we saw it for sure in the Rauh Bowl, was running back Dylan Edwards and wide receiver Jace Brown. Thankfully, both those players are going to be in a Wildcats uniform come next season, come week 0, when the two reigning winners of the Pop-Tart Bowl will take on each other in Dublin, Ireland, between Iowa State and Kansas State. We'll have Dylan Edwards, we'll have Jace Brown, we'll have Avery Johnson. We won't have to worry about them entering the transfer portal. And that's a very, very great feeling to have heading into next season. Heading into next season with a team that has 9 wins yet again. One of the only few teams that has that consistency across the board. Now, how do you make that next step to get to that 10-win, 11-win threshold to move yourself into the Big 12 championship conversation and into the college football playoffs? That is what is on the docket moving forward in 2025. And pieces like this into the transfer portal, not only the one staying, which is the biggest win, will say that, but the pieces that they added are a big asset and big reason why you make that jump. Now, yes, there's a huge recruiting class, and that is great momentum. And Coach Kleiman did say that he is going to continue to make his focuses on the recruiting, the high school aspect, which, in my opinion, is the best route to take. But this transfer portal, we should not ignore it by any means. And if you would have told me at the beginning of the portal, before the Rauh Bowl, probably about a week before the bowl game, you might have thought that Kansas State was actually ignoring the transfer portal. There was about 14 players that left Kansas State, and until about a week before the Christmas holiday, Not a single player came in to Manhattan, at least committed to. Thankfully, that did change, and there was 3 offensive additions and 4 defensive additions heading into Manhattan. And I don't think they're done, and that's what we're going to talk about here at the end, what I think is still ahead for this squad. But let's dig into the 3 offensive additions first, because I do think that all of them are going to be a huge impact right off the bat in 2025. I think it's safe to start with the 2 wide receivers because it was probably the most talked about position group in all of Kansas State football heading into the offseason. After the departures of Keegan Johnson and both Trace Bivey, heck, even before the departures of those 2, it was truly a depleted group, probably the most depleted position group on the entire team. Once they both departed, it was obvious that there was some needed adjustments, some needed additions, with Jace Brown being the only player on the team that had somewhat some major college experience at the wide receiver position. Well, they did add some 2 exciting wide receivers, in my opinion. I'm really excited to see what they got. Jaren Bradley, the wide receiver, 6'5", 200 pounds. And then you got Jaren Tibbs as well, wide receiver, 6'3", 210 pounds. Biggest thing to take away from this right off the bat, and we did dig deep into the wide receiver, especially the Tibbs conversation on a past episode. So if you want to dig into more on the Tibbs side, go ahead and check that out. But overall, the biggest takeaway is they went for size. That's something that we haven't seen for quite some time with Kansas State wide receivers. If you watched the Rauh Bowl, which I'm sure you did, and you saw the speed of Dylan Edwards and then the speed, of course, of Jace Brown, those jet sweeps, where were those all season? Hopefully we get those about 1,000,006 times in 2025. I hope we start 2025 off week 0 with a Guinness and a jet sweep. That's what I want to see. I 100% want to see a Jace Brown jet sweep first play of the game. That's what I want to see. But when it comes to these wide receivers, you got size. You get the speed of Jace Brown, who can play the outside, who can be a deep threat as well. And we saw that multiple times in 2025. Not enough, but we saw it. And then you add this red zone threat of Tibbs and Bradley, who can make those contested outside fade route catches. And then you have the experience and the really the tough tight end room that is only hopefully improved with the top recruit in the history of Kansas State in Lincoln Cure. We'll see what he's got under his sleeve in 2025. Even though you did lose running back DJ Giddens, who was a powerhouse, who was a fantastic running back, he heads to the NFL draft. You lose that one aspect at the running back position in the goal line area, in the scoring area. I think you improved your overall offense with these 2 wide receiver pickups. I think both of those wide receivers, especially Tibbs, were underutilized at their former programs. Tibbs played at Purdue, 1-11 Purdue, and that one win was against an FCS school. So I'm really excited to see what he does at the Big 12 level, the best college football conference in America. And I think we're already starting to notice that too, if you've paid attention to the results in the bowl games, right? It's the best conference in America. Definitely did not get the love they deserved when it came to the college football playoffs, without question. I'm really excited with these wide receivers. We're going to dig into these way more for sure. There's no doubt about that, because these wide receivers deserve the love. I'm excited to see what they can do when it comes to spring ball, because I think these 2 receivers both have an opportunity to compete for wide receiver 2, and then probably they'll finish wide receiver 3, unless they're not done, which we'll talk about at the end of the show. I have a dream list, and one of them, little sneak peek, little spoiler alert, is a wide receiver. The offensive line got a little addition as well. They did say goodbye to some of their offensive line in the transfer portal. Some did move on, and they brought in from USC, and I think I'm going to butcher his name, and I apologize if I do, Amos Talaly. And I think I said it right. I'm not sure. If I said it wrong, let me know in the comment description below. Still working on that one. But overall, according to On3, 118th in the position group. Nationally in the 1500s, but take that as you will. But former 4-star, very exciting to see what we're going to see from him. I'm really looking forward to seeing his aspect perform in Kansas State, because although we have a very high standard of offensive linemen, And what I mean by that is, although they won a million, it felt like they won a million awards this year, but they won some very top-notch awards in the offensive line category this season. But if you would have headed the social media, if you would have headed to the message boards this during the season, you would have thought it was the worst offensive line in the history of Kansas State and the worst in college football. You would have thought we were talking about Kent State's offensive line, right? But that wasn't the case. They were fantastic. The standard is just super high. And that's a great part to be at, because that line has to establish a great running game, has to protect your program quarterback of Avery Johnson, and you got to score points in a Big 12 conference that plays great offense, plays good defense. You have to put up points to win football games. They've done a good job of doing that over the last couple seasons. Obviously, they did it this year with 9 wins. But to get that 10-11 threshold, you got to find those X factors, those players that can make that next step forward. I'd love to see a guy like Talaly be that next guy moving forward. When you come from something from the Big Ten, we got a guy like Tibbs coming from Purdue, Talaly, which is still weird to say, coming from the Big Ten. I'm about to say USC, but getting that type of player who was in a system in USC, great system, heading into another great system in Kansas State under the offensive Connor Riley, who strengths are with offensive line. Got to be excited about that. And I really am. I'm looking forward to seeing what we get from this offense. Only 3 pieces for the offense. I don't think we're done there, and we'll get to that in just a minute, but I do want to go to the defense first, and we'll get that right after this here on Locked On Kansas State. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Because that definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy for me to track them down all at once. It's like having a personal assistant for your financing. How great is that, right? Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you find and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Everybody's got that 2025 savings plan or what they want to do with your finances. What a better time to check out Rocket Money. Whether it's your subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. I mean, perfect time for it, right? Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. That could help you up for a nice package preparing you for Dublin. Look at that. That could get you, that could pay for your plane flight right there. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. And welcome on back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh. Hey, for your second listen, check out Drake Toll. He just hit 100 million views in the month of December. The first Locked On college channel to do so. He's killing it, and no other conference is doing it. The Big 12. Drake Toll's doing a fantastic job over there. If you haven't checked it out, make that your second listen today. We're talking about the transfer portal and what we saw with the offense, the 3 additions. We talked about the biggest wins. It's not even new people coming in. It's the fact that Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards and Jace Brown are still Kansas State Wildcats. We're still talking about that. And I'm probably going to continue to be excited about that until we see them on senior night saying goodbye and bid us adieu when they enter the NFL draft in a few years. Because I think all 3 of those players are going to be playing on Sundays. I think that's the case. We talked about those 3 offensive players, how I'm really excited for those wide receivers and that offensive line. Well, I do think it needs a little bit of push moving forward. The defensive side, I think they hit almost every need right on the head. Again, which we'll mention later on at the show, I do think that they're not done on the defensive side, but I think they did a lot more work to hit those little pieces that were needed compared to on the offensive side. And I'll start with the cornerback and Jaden Rauh. Jaden Rauh is going to be a really interesting piece. He had a lot of injuries while at Oklahoma, but a lot of upside. Heading into this piece, I didn't know whether to call him a linebacker, a cornerback, a safety. For a long time, I just called him the defensive player coming in. It sounds like he's going to be in the secondary at some point. That's what it sounds like. On3 has him listed as a cornerback now. It wasn't the case the entire time once he transferred over, but I think that's where he's heading for Kansas State. He is a very versatile player, and if he's healthy on the field, I think he can be a very great step forward for Kansas State. Really excited to see what a guy like Rauh can do. Gabe Powers at the linebacker position from Ohio State. This kid is huge. I am so excited to watch another Big Ten guy coming in, Marysville, Ohio, coming in from Ohio State to Kansas State in what we all know with a linebacking core that truly needs help. They brought in so many on National Signing Day, freshman class, bringing in multiple linebackers because they knew the need was there. You can focus those guys on the special teams if need be. A guy like Gabe Powers can be a day one starter in your linebacker core. 6'4", 225 pounds. You kidding me? I'm excited for that one. Really looking forward to what we're seeing from a guy like Gabe Powers. Then you got two safeties coming in, and I think these two safeties, once again as well, when we're talking about all these, I didn't say about Rauh. I think Rauh has the potential to be a day one starter. I think he's got a little bit of work to do, especially at the cornerback position, and especially for what I saw at the Rauh Bowl with guys like Zason Rich, with McIntosh, how they performed, and then James coming back as well. I think we're in a really good spot with cornerback compared to where we were talking about this past offseason, even with an NFL talent like Jacob Parrish. I think we're heading in the right direction to be in a more improved cornerback position. And dare I just say secondary as a whole position moving into 2025. And when I talk about the safeties, I'm talking about these two coming up that I'm about to talk about because I think both of them have the potential to be day one starters. Marcavius Moss has the potential to be the jack safety for Kansas State from day one to hopefully when we are talking about us in the college football playoffs in 2025. I mean, what we saw from him, he was very highly sought after. He had multiple Power 4 offers. He decides to go with Kansas State. You got to love what you saw from them. We dug into the Moss conversation on a last episode. You want to check that out. I highly recommend you do so. And you'll probably see me be just as excited as I am right now, maybe even a little more excited because the information on this guy is just, it's through the roof. And I'm looking forward to see what he can do, West Point, Georgia guy, heading into 2025. But overall, I think probably my most excited pickup, we haven't had a chance to talk about him yet because we switched to bowl prep. Gunnar Maldonado. He was a leader, a captain for the Arizona Wildcats this past season. Now, Arizona didn't have a great season. There's a lot of high potential for that team. Brett Brennan coming in as the new coach after the shift, the coaching change. They did have a great offense. At least they hoped that was the case. It never worked out. Gunnar Maldonado, one of the captains, one of the leaders, had a great season until he got injured. And then obviously a lot of players are leaving in the transfer portal. He was one of them. The fact that Kansas State landed him is huge. I think he has the potential to be one of the starting safeties in Kansas State for 2025. I think that there is a huge potential that we see both of them start at safety for the next season. I'm really excited for what we're getting out of him. All right, let's move on here because there's plenty still to talk about. And what I want to get to is what's still ahead for Kansas State and where the focus needs to be and where it needs to shift for the rest of the offseason. We're going to finish that up in this episode here on Locked On Kansas State. Welcome on back to Locked On Kansas State. And what is still ahead for this team after the Rauh Bowl victory? Fantastic victory, by the way, at that. What a comeback finish. And what we saw from some of the younger players I talked about on the live stream, thank you so much, by the way, for making the most watched video so far on Locked On Kansas State. If you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, please check it out. If you're listening in audio form, thank you so much as well. Please do me a favor. If you're on Apple Podcast, I would love for you to leave a review. It does help push out the podcast and all that good things. It helps to get it out to different people. And of course, it helps with the 5-star rating as well. Same with Spotify. You can rate the show or you can download it. When it comes to what is still ahead and what focus still needs to be shifted, where they need to shift their focus, I should say, for the rest of the offseason, I don't think that they're done looking in the portal. although they picked up 7 players, and I wasn't sure where that number was going to land when we finished the portal officially, right? And officially, the portal is closed. Now, there are some, I guess you could say, loopholes, if you will. That's probably not the right word, but there's still some visits on the table from some players that have yet to commit from the portal. We'll get to them in just a minute. But when it comes to the portal, for guys like Kansas State, it's closed. It's been past their bowl game and past the threshold of what needed to be done for that aspect. The overall transfer portal closed on December 28th for players or teams that did not make the bowl games. And for multiple other teams, if they had early bowl games. There is one really exception for the transfer portal right now. I guess 2. One is a coaching change, but I think we've got all of those coaching changes already. Teams are starting to do that. Programs are starting to do that a lot earlier because they understand the importance of getting that step ahead right away when it comes to this transfer portal. And they usually want to have their next coach in place right away. So I don't know if we're going to see any more coaching changes. I doubt we're going to see any in the college football playoffs getting fired. I don't think that's happening. I think the only one that would come to mind is James Franklin of Penn State, but I think he's always been on the rumor hill for about 10 years now. So I don't think that's going to happen. Regardless, for playoff teams and teams that have yet to still play their bowl game, because there are a few, they have a 5-day extension in the post their season, once their season ends, to enter the portals. So players, if you haven't seen a lot of like Texas players or Oregon players enter the portal, that's why, because I do have 5 players. So technically the national championship is January 20th. So the portal will officially close, barring a coaching change, on January 25th, excuse me. So what is next for Kansas State, right? Well, there are a few visits still on the docket, and I do think that they have a couple position groups still look at. And I think they've already attacked the position groups that I still want them to attack. Like first, linebacker. Although I love Gabe Powers, and I think he's going to be a dynamic player for Kansas State, although I think he's going to be potentially and probably a day one starter, haven't had the best track record for linebackers coming in the transfer portal. So it would probably be a pretty good idea to maybe bring in 1 or potentially 2 more if possible. Now, there are some players that look like they're going to be potentially committing to Kansas State. There's been a report going out that Rauh from West Florida looks like he'll be committing. So that's something to keep in mind. We'll get to him. If he does commit, we'll break him down on a later show. But when you look at this linebacker position, I think you could always add more than just the Gabe Powers and the recruiting class that you had coming in for 2025's overall class into Manhattan. I think you can. And I think that was the biggest question mark that you had for this defense. Although it seemed like the secondary overshadowed it just because of maybe some big plays, I think the biggest weakness, the biggest issue was the middle of that group, the linebackers, and it was forcing other team or other position groups to have to overcompensate. So I think that is the number one priority where I'm at right now is add more to the linebacking crew. How about wide receiver, though? You already got 2. Should you get 1 more? Should you do it? I think so, yes. And I think this is where I'm going to put my number 1 wish list piece that is still out there. Now, there could be more, and now it's subject to change. I'm going to say that. My wish list is subject to change. But as of right now, and it seems like there's a possibility that it could happen because he's going to make a visit to Manhattan on January 3rd, and that is Florida State transfer Malik Benson, Lansing, Kansas native. It could be a really nice piece for this wide receiver group. If a Malik Benson comes in, commits to Kansas State, and you're walking in to 2025 with Jace Brown, with Tibbs, with Bradley, Benson, you see hopefully an improvement from Sterling Lockett, who had his moments in the punt return game. He didn't fumble. That was good. He didn't get enough moments really in the Rape Bowl, but he had an opportunity. I expect we're going to see that come more in spring ball. If you walk into that, I feel like you're in a way better position group than you were in 2024, even with the names of Keegan Johnson, Trey Spivey, and Cephas. So I think that you got to put all your dice, you got to put all your energy into a guy like Malik Benson, and it sounds like they're going to as he's visiting right after the new year. Sounds like he's coming in on Thursday. Really looking forward to that. The beginning of the year starts with WTF, right? Isn't that wild? Well, I hope that we don't get into a wild WTF moment. I hope we get into the only surprises we get at the beginning of 2025 is maybe a commit that we weren't paying attention to, or maybe a guy like Malik Benson. And I'm going to finish off this show with cornerback. I do think that even though I feel like we're in a very nice spot when it comes to cornerback, I think it's the number one position group that you could always have more of, because most cornerbacks are probably some of your best athletic pieces on your team, and you can always utilize them in special teams. And unfortunately, you do see a lot of injuries with that as well. But I'm really high on Zayshawn Rich. Although he let up that deep ball in the Rape Bowl, he bounced back so nicely in the second half. And I think we saw him grow right in front of our eyes, kind of just put him right on the spot, made him into a potential starting cornerback for 2025. I have a lot of faith in a guy like Rich, and I think he can be up for the challenge. But another piece definitely wouldn't hurt. I really liked what I saw from Donovan McIntosh as well. I said that earlier. I thought he had a great pass breakup in the Rape Bowl. I think he's a very aggressive corner. I think he does very good when it comes to man coverage as well. But again, I think another piece really wouldn't hurt. What's on the docket for the rest of the week? Well, we have Big 12 basketball coming up. Conference play starts today. So we got plenty to talk about. We'll be digging into that. I don't think we're going to go live for the show, but we'll have a recap for you bright and early on Tuesday morning. We're going to talk about the women's basketball game as well, because they're already deep in conference play. They're heading into their second game, and we're going to continue digging through this roster and talking more about these visits, hopefully talk about some more commits here at Kansas State football. We got a lot more to talk about this week and this year. We're going to have a little fun one right on New Year's Day too. I want to tell you why 2025 will be a fantastic year for Kansas State athletics. I'm going to give you reasons for the football squad and for both men's and women's basketball. I think you're going to like that one. So be sure to stay tuned, hit like and subscribe while you're here. Hit those notification bell so you can make sure you don't miss a single Locked On Kansas State episode. But until then, please hit like, hit subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.